Lieutenant Kira Moonwhisper had been flying patrol routes for nearly 300 years, and she thought she had seen everything the galaxy could offer, but today was going to prove her very wrong. Her twin dragons, Ember and Frost, glided through the purple clouds of the Valtor system with the easy grace that came from centuries of partnership, and Kira felt the familiar connection humming through her mind as they shared thoughts and sensations the way only bonded pairs could. The distress signal came through her communication device with sharp urgency, and Kira felt her heart jump into her throat because it was coming from Scout Team 7, the group she had personally trained and who she thought of almost like her younger siblings' team. 7. This is Moonwhisper. What is your status? She called out while urging Ember into a steep dive toward the coordinates. The response came broken and filled with static, but the words that made it through were enough to freeze her blood raiders. We are surrounded, they have us pinned down, and we need immediate. She recognized Lieutenant Hayes' voice and heard weapon fire in the background. They are executing prisoners, we need backup. Now, Kira's mind raced through tactical options because she was 15 minutes away even at full speed, and 15 minutes was an eternity in combat situations. Sending my location. Now. Hayes continued, and Kira could hear the desperation creeping into his normally steady voice. We called for a medical evac, but I do not think we can hold that long medical evac, Kira repeated, and felt something click in her memory because there was a human medical ship doing supply runs in this sector, and humans had proven surprisingly fast at responding to emergencies. Who responded to your medical call? She asked while Ember poured on more speed and Frost kept pace beside them. Some human named Danny. Something Hayes said, and Kira heard more weapon fire through the connection. He said he was 10 minutes out, and 2. Hold on 10 minutes, Kira thought and felt a mixture of hope and dread, because what could one human medic possibly do against a Krevath raider team? She knew humans were still very new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel about 50 years ago, and while they had proven to be friendly and eager to help, they were also small and fragile compared to most spacefaring species. The Krevath raiders, on the other hand, were 7 feet tall with natural armor plating, and a reputation for brutality that made even hardened warriors nervous. Kira pushed Ember faster, and felt her dragon's determination matching her own, because Scout Team 7 was their responsibility, and they would not abandon them. The communication channel suddenly filled with screaming, and Kira's hands tightened on Ember's scales hard enough to hurt. Hayes' report, she shouted into the device. They just shot Chen. Hayes' voice came back raw with pain and fury. They are lining us up and shooting, us one by one. Like we are nothing. How many raiders? Kira demanded while her mind calculated attack strategies. 15. Hayes answered, maybe more. They have us completely surrounded, and our weapons are almost out of charge. 15 trained Krevath raiders, against 6 scouts who were low on ammunition and already taking casualties, and 1 human medic who was apparently flying straight into this nightmare. Kira opened the general frequency and hoped the human would be monitoring it. Human medical vessel. This is Lieutenant Kira Moonwhisper of the Elven Stellar Command. You are flying into an active combat situation with 15 hostile raiders. I repeat, this is not a safe landing zone. The response came immediately in a voice that sounded young and calm in a way that seemed completely wrong for the situation. Acknowledged, Lieutenant. This is Medic Danny Brooks, and I have patients who need help, so I am coming in regardless. Kira felt her breath catch because that was either the bravest or most foolish thing she had ever heard. You do not understand, she tried again. These are Krevath raiders. They will kill you before you can even open your medical kit. I understand perfectly. Danny's voice came back, still unnaturally calm. But my patients need me, and I took an oath, so we are doing this. Ember rumbled beneath her, and Kira felt her dragon's approval flowing through their bond, which was strange because Ember usually had excellent survival instincts. The communication from Hayes cut in again, and this time his voice held a note of pure terror. They just shot Rivera. They are moving down the line. Kira, we need that backup now. I am 8 minutes out, Kira said, feeling helpless and hating it. The human is here, Hayes suddenly said. And Kira heard the confusion in his voice. He just landed right in the middle of everything. Kira felt her heart stop because landing in the middle of a combat zone was suicide, especially for an unarmed medic. "What is he doing?" she asked. Hayes was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again his voice held a quality of disbelief. "He is walking toward us through the raiders. He has his medical kit, and he is just walking. Like they are not even there." That made no sense whatsoever, because the Cravath should be tearing him apart. "The raiders," Kira prompted. "What are they doing?" "They are laughing," Hayes said slowly. "Like this is the funniest thing they have ever seen. They think he does not understand what is happening." Kira urged Ember even faster while her mind tried to make sense of what she was hearing. Then Hayes' voice came back through the channel, but it had changed into something shocked and almost scared. "Oh, by the stars, he just reached Chen. He is starting treatment right there in the open. The raiders are still laughing, but he is ignoring them completely." What happened next came through the communication in broken fragments because Hayes seemed unable to process what he was witnessing. "One of the raiders just tried to grab him," Hayes whispered, and Kira heard something crack through the channel. "The raider is down. Danny just did something I could not even see, and now he is back to treating Chen like nothing happened." Kira and her dragons burst through the cloud layer, and she could see the combat site below, a clearing surrounded by dark trees with a human medical shuttle landed in the center. "The other raiders are not laughing anymore," Hayes continued, and his voice held a note of awe. "They are backing up, but Danny is not even looking at them. He is completely focused on Chen." Kira sent Ember into a combat dive with Frost right beside her, and as they got closer she could finally see what was happening. A human in medical whites was kneeling beside a wounded elf working on injuries, with steady hands, while 14 Cravath raiders formed a wary circle around him. One raider stepped forward, raising his weapon, and Kira opened her mouth to shout a warning, but the human moved faster than should have been possible, and the raider went down hard. Then Danny Brooks went back to treating his patient like absolutely nothing had happened. Kira realized in that moment that the galaxy's understanding of humans was about to change forever. Kira watched from above as the human medic continued his work with a focus that seemed almost supernatural. Because he was treating a critically wounded patient while surrounded by hostile raiders who could kill him at any moment, Ember circled lower, and Kira could see more details now, including the purple blood already staining the human's white uniform, which meant at least one raider had learned the hard way not to interrupt a human medic at work. Hayes came through the communication again, and his voice held a mixture of pain and amazement. "He just finished stabilizing Chen, and now he is moving to Rivera. But the raiders are starting to regroup. They look angry." Kira could see it happening below as the Cravath seemed to shake off their initial shock and confusion at having one of their own taken down so easily by something as small as a human. She urged Ember into a faster descent, but they were still 4 minutes away, and 4 minutes might as well be forever in combat. Time 3 raiders rushed the human at once, and Kira felt her breath stop. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but it would replay in Kira's mind for years afterward. Danny moved like water flowing around obstacles, and all 3 raiders went down in a tangle of limbs and confusion, before the human was back beside Rivera checking her pulse and preparing injections. "He is not even breathing hard," Hayes whispered through the channel. "How is that possible?" Kira had no answer because nothing in the galactic database about humans suggested they should be capable of this level of combat ability, especially not their medical personnel, who were supposed to be peaceful non-combatants. The remaining raiders were clearly rethinking their approach, now backing up and speaking quickly among themselves in their harsh language. Danny seemed to finish whatever emergency treatment Rivera needed, and then he did something that made Kira's heart nearly stop. He stood up and turned to face the raiders directly. For a long moment nobody moved, and Kira could see the human was saying something, though she was still too far away to hear. Whatever he said made the Cravath leader step forward, pointing his weapon directly at Danny's chest. The human did not flinch, did not move, just stood there with blood covering his uniform and met the raiders' eyes. Hayes' voice came through tight with fear. He just told them that he has more patients to treat, and they can either leave now or join their friends. On the ground. That was insane, Kira thought, because you did not give ultimatums to Cravath raiders, especially not when you were outnumbered. 11 to 1. The raider leader laughed a harsh sound that carried even up to where Kira circled and raised. His weapon to fire Danny moved first. Kira had seen many forms of combat in her 3 centuries, from the elegant swordwork of elven masters to the brutal efficiency of Cravath shock troops, but she had never seen anything quite like what the human medic did. He was not trying to win some glorious victory or prove his superiority. He was simply removing obstacles between himself and his patients with the same calm efficiency that he probably used to organize his medical supplies. The raider leader went down and Danny had his weapon before it hit the ground. 2 more raiders charged and Danny used their own momentum against them, sending them sprawling. A 4th tried to grab him from behind and found himself flipped over the humans, shoulder to land hard enough that Kira heard the impact from her position in the air. Hayes' voice came through stunned. He is not fighting them. He is just moving and they keep hitting the ground. That was exactly what it looked like. Kira realized as she watched Danny flow through the remaining raiders like he was performing some kind of dance, and they were simply bad partners who kept tripping over their own feet. Ember rumbled with approval, and Kira felt her dragon's respect for the human growing with each passing second. Another raider down and another, and the human never stopped moving. Never wasted energy on unnecessary strikes, just did exactly what was needed and nothing more. The last 6 raiders seemed to reach some kind of decision simultaneously, and they all rushed Danny at once. Kira opened her mouth to shout a warning, but Frost was faster, diving past her with a roar that shook the trees. The ice dragon hit the ground between Danny and the charging raiders with enough force to crack the earth, and her presence finally broke whatever courage the Cravath had left. They scattered, running for the tree line, while Frost watched them go, with her cold blue eyes tracking each one. Ember landed beside Frost a moment later, and Kira slid from her dragon's back with her weapon ready. But the human had already turned back to his patients, kneeling beside Rivera again to check her status. Hayes was struggling to stand, his leg clearly injured, and Danny was there in an instant. "Easing him back down. Stay still, Lieutenant," the human said in that same calm voice. "You have a fractured tibia, and if you put weight on it, you will make it worse." Hayes stared at him like he was seeing some kind of mythical creature. "You just took down 9 Cravath raiders by yourself." Danny shrugged while pulling medical equipment from his kit. "They were interfering with patient care. That is unacceptable." Kira approached, slowly, aware that Ember and Frost were flanking her protectively, which was strange because usually she was the one protecting them. The human looked up as she got closer, and she saw his eyes properly for the first time. They were brown and warm and completely calm, despite the purple blood covering most of his body, and the fact that he had just fought off multiple raiders single-handedly. "Lieutenant Moonwhisper, I assume," Danny said politely. "I am Medic Danny Brooks, and I apologize for the delay, but I need to finish treating my patients before we do formal introductions." Kira found herself nodding numbly, because what else could she do when faced with someone who considered fighting off raiders to be a minor delay in his medical duties? She watched as Danny moved between the wounded scouts with steady hands, checking vitals, administering medications, and speaking in a low, soothing voice that seemed to calm even the most panicked patients. Rivera had been shot in the chest and should have died minutes ago, but Danny had her stabilized and breathing easily. Chen had taken damage to his arm that would have meant amputation by any other field medic, but Danny seemed confident he could save it. Hayes, with his fractured leg, was already fitted with a temporary brace and looking far more comfortable. The other 3 scouts, who had been pinned down but not injured yet, were staring at Danny like he had just performed some kind of miracle. Maybe he had, Kira thought, as she watched him work, because taking down trained Cravath raiders while simultaneously providing emergency medical care was not something that should be possible. But humans kept doing impossible things. That seemed to be their special talent. Kira stood beside her dragons and watched Danny work with a precision that spoke of years of training and practice. Even though humans had only been in space for 50 years, the medic's hands never shook, never hesitated, even though he was covered in purple blood and had just fought off nearly a dozen armed raiders. Hayes was the first to find his voice again, though it came out rough and uncertain. "How did you do that?" Danny did not look up from the scanner he was running over Chen's damaged arm. "Do what?" he asked absently while adjusting settings. Hayes gestured vaguely at the clearing, at the unconscious raiders, at the entire impossible situation. "All of that, fight 9. Cravath raiders while treating critical patients at the same time. Danny finally glanced up and seemed genuinely confused by the question. They were threatening my patients, he said, like that explained everything, so I handled it. Handled it, Kira repeated. Because that word seemed woefully inadequate for what she had just witnessed, the human shrugged and went back to his scanner. I am a medic. My job is to keep people alive when something gets in the way of that job. I removed the obstacle. Ember moved closer, her massive red-scaled head lowering until she was nearly eye level with Danny, and Kira felt her dragon's curiosity flowing through their bond. Most species would have run Danny Brooks, Kira said carefully, or called for backup or found a way to retreat. Danny's hands paused for just a moment. My patients could not retreat, he said quietly. And I took an oath a long time ago that said I would do no harm, but it never said I could not prevent harm from happening to those under my care. Frost made a low rumbling sound that Kira recognized as approval, and the ice dragon moved to sit beside Ember, both of them watching the human with an intensity that made Kira nervous. Her dragons had never shown this kind of immediate interest in anyone before. Chen groaned as Danny's scanner hit a particularly sensitive spot, and the medic immediately adjusted his approach, speaking in that low, soothing voice. Easy. There, Corporal, I know it hurts, but your arm is going to be fine. I promise you that. Chen's eyes focused on Danny, and Kira saw the same expression of confused gratitude. That Hayes War you came for us, the wounded elf whispered. Why would you risk yourself like that? Danny met Chen's eyes and smiled in a way that seemed sad and determined all at once. Because you called for help, he said simply, and I am a medic, that is what we do. Rivera stirred, then her breathing more stable now and her eyes fluttered open. She looked around at the clearing, at the unconscious raiders, at Danny kneeling beside her, and her face went through several expressions before settling on shock. The medic, she said weakly, you are the one who came. Danny nodded while checking her vitals again. Try not to move too much, Lieutenant. You took a nasty hit to the chest, but your armor absorbed most of it. You are going to be sore for a while, but you will make a full recovery. Rivera's hand shot out and grabbed Danny's wrist with surprising strength. You fought them, she said, her voice gaining intensity. You fought all of them for us. The human looked uncomfortable with the attention, and Kira saw him try to deflect. I just did my job. Anyone would have done the same. No, Kira said firmly, stepping closer. Not anyone would have done that. Most would have waited for backup or retreated to safety. What you did was extraordinary. Danny looked up at her, and she saw something in his expression that made her understand him a little better. He did not see himself as extraordinary. He saw himself as someone who had patience, who needed help. And that was all that mattered. Ember lowered her head further and gently pressed her snout against Danny's shoulder in a gesture of respect that made Kira's breath catch. Her dragon had only ever done that for warriors who had proven exceptional courage and loyalty. Danny reached up automatically to pat Ember's scaled nose, leaving a purple handprint behind. You have beautiful dragons, he said to Kira with genuine appreciation in his voice. Kira felt herself smile despite everything, because this human had just fought off raiders without breaking a sweat, but was impressed by her dragons. They seem to like you, she observed. Danny smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and more approachable. Animals usually do, he said. I think they sense that. I mean, no harm. Frost moved in then, on Danny's other side, and both dragons flanked him like they had decided he was pack. Now Kira had bonded with Ember and Frost over 200 years ago, and she knew their instincts were usually correct. If they trusted this human, then maybe the galaxy needed to reconsider everything it thought it knew about humanity. Hayes cleared his throat, drawing attention back to the practical matters. What do we do about them? He gestured toward the unconscious raiders. Danny followed his gaze, and his expression shifted back into something clinical. They will wake up in a few hours with headaches and bruises, but nothing permanent. I made sure of that. You could have killed them, Kira pointed out, because she had seen how efficiently he moved and knew he could have ended those fights permanently if he had wanted. Danny's expression became serious. I am a medic, Lieutenant. Killing is not my job. Healing is I only use enough force to protect my patients, nothing more. That philosophy seemed impossibly idealistic to Kira, especially given how violent the galaxy could be. What if they come back, she asked. What if they attack again? Then I will stop them again, Danny said with quiet certainty. But I will not kill, unless there is absolutely no other choice. Ember rumbled her approval, and Kira felt the message flowing through their bond. The dragon respected the human's restraint, saw it as a sign of true strength rather than weakness. Maybe that was another thing the galaxy needed to learn, that humans could be incredibly dangerous when necessary, but chose not to be. That choice, that restraint, was perhaps more impressive than raw power. Danny finished his examination of Chen's arm and pulled out some kind of device that Kira did not recognize. This is going to feel strange, he warned Chen, but it will accelerate your healing. The device hummed to life, and Chen gasped as whatever it did took effect. Human medical technology was still relatively new to the galactic community, and Kira found herself watching with fascination as the swelling in Chen's arm visibly decreased. The other 3 scouts who had been watching in silence finally approached. One of them, a young elf named Kyle, spoke up hesitantly. Thank you, he said to Danny. You saved our lives. The human looked up at all 6 scouts, and Kira saw something shift in his expression. You would have done the same for me, he said with complete confidence. If I was injured, you would have held that line no matter what. Right? The scouts nodded, because it was true. Then we are even, Danny said, standing up and stretching his back, which made several joints pop. Kira noticed for the first time that the human was trembling slightly, probably from adrenaline crash now that the immediate danger had passed. You should sit down, she said gently, before you fall down. Danny opened his mouth to protest, but Ember moved behind him and gently pushed him toward a fallen log with her snout. The human sat with a surprised laugh. Okay, I get the message, Frost settled beside him, and Danny absently leaned against the dragon's cool scales. While pulling out some kind of nutrient bar from his kit, Kira sat across from him, aware that her scouts were watching this interaction with intense interest. We need to talk about what happens next, she said. Danny took a bite of his nutrient bar and looked at Kira with those calm brown eyes that seemed far too peaceful for someone who had just been in combat. What happens next? He repeated, like he had not considered that there might be consequences to flying into an active combat zone and fighting off raiders. Kira gestured at the clearing at the unconscious Kravath, at the whole situation. You just engaged in combat as a medical officer that is going to raise questions with both human and galactic. Command. Danny frowned slightly. I protected my patients. That is within my rights as a medic under every treaty. Humans have signed. That is technically true, Kira admitted. But the way you protected them, that level of combatability, is not something we expected from human medical personnel. The medic was quiet for a moment, and Kira could see him choosing his words carefully. Humans come from a dangerous world, he said finally. Our planet tried to kill us for most of our evolution, so we learned to adapt. We learned to protect ourselves and the people we care about. Hayes shifted his position carefully, favoring his injured leg. But you are a medic. You dedicated your life to healing. How do you reconcile that with being able to fight like that? Danny's expression became thoughtful, and he stared down at his blood-stained hands. On Earth, we have doctors who work in war zones, in disaster areas, in places where violence is common. They learn to heal and protect at the same time. Because sometimes the people who need help the most are in the most dangerous places. Chen spoke up, his voice still weak but curious. So all human medics can fight like you can? Danny shook his head. No. Most of us focus purely on medical skills, but some of us come from backgrounds where we learned combat first. I was a rescue specialist before I became a medic. I worked in places where things went wrong and people got hurt. That explained some of it, Kira thought, but not everything, because the efficiency she had witnessed went beyond basic combat training. Rivera managed to prop herself up on one elbow, despite Danny's immediate concerned look. What kind of rescue specialist, she asked. The kind that goes into burning buildings or collapsed structures or hostile situations to pull people out? Danny said with a slight smile, the kind that does not take no for an answer when someone needs help. Ember shifted beside him, and Kira felt her dragon's understanding flowing through their bond. The human was not a warrior who Learned medicine, he was a healer who learned to fight because his calling required it. There was a difference, and it was important. Frost made a low sound, and Danny turned to look at the ice dragon with obvious affection. "Your dragons are amazing," said to Kira. "I have read about bonded pairs, but seeing it in person is incredible." Kira felt herself warm at the compliment, because her dragons were her pride and joy. "They seem to have adopted you," she observed, "which is unusual. Ember and Frost do not typically trust strangers so quickly." Danny reached up to run his hand along Frost's neck, and the dragon leaned into the touch. "Maybe they sense that I have no hostile intent," he suggested. "Or maybe they just like me because I smell like interesting chemicals." That startled a laugh out of Kira, because the human's ability to make jokes while covered in blood was somehow both disturbing and endearing. "We still need to figure out what to report," she said, bringing the conversation back to practical matters. "My command is going to want a full explanation." Danny nodded and took another bite of his nutrient bar. "Tell them the truth. I responded to a medical emergency, encountered hostile forces preventing treatment, and removed the obstacles without causing permanent harm." "You make it sound so simple," Hayes muttered. "It was simple," Danny said with a shrug. "My patients needed help. Someone was stopping me from helping. I solved the problem." Kyle, the young scout who had thanked Danny earlier, moved closer. "Will you get in trouble for this with your human commanders?" The medic considered that question seriously. Probably, he admitted, humans have rules about medical personnel engaging in combat, but I am willing to accept whatever consequences come because I would make the same choice again. That kind of conviction was rare, Kira thought, and admirable. She understood now why her dragons had taken to him so quickly, because creatures of instinct recognize someone who lived by a clear code. Chen cleared his throat for what it is worth. "We will testify that you only acted in defense of patients, that you gave the raiders chances to leave peacefully." Danny looked surprised, like he had not expected the scouts to support him. "You do not have to do that." "Yes, we do," Rivera said firmly. "You saved our lives. The least we can do is tell the truth." Hayes nodded agreement. "Besides, anyone who watches the helmet cam footage will see exactly what happened. You were defending wounded personnel. That is justified under any military code." Kira had forgotten about the helmet cameras that her scouts wore, which meant there would be a complete recording of everything that happened that might actually work in Danny's favor, she realized, because it would show his restraint, show how he tried to avoid escalation. Ember suddenly lifted her head, and Kira felt the warning flowing through their bond. The raiders were starting to wake up. Danny was on his feet immediately, his whole demeanor shifting back into alert readiness. "Everyone behind me," he said quietly. The scouts moved despite their injuries because something in Danny's voice commanded instant obedience. The first Krevath to regain consciousness groaned and sat up slowly, one hand going to his head. He looked around at his unconscious companions, at the human standing over him, at the two massive dragons flanking Danny like honor guards. The raider's eyes widened with recognition and fear. "You," he growled, his voice rough. Danny crossed his arms, and Kira noticed that despite the casual pose, he was perfectly balanced, ready to move if necessary. "Me," the human agreed. "Your friends are starting to wake up too, so I'm going to make this very clear." The other raiders were stirring now, groaning and struggling to sit up. "You attacked my patients," Danny said, his voice carrying clearly. "You threatened people under my medical care. That was your first mistake." More raiders were conscious now, all of them staring at Danny with expressions that ranged from confusion to anger to fear. "Gave you a chance to leave peacefully," the human continued. "That was your second chance." The raider leader pushed himself up, looking around at his scattered team, at the dragons, at the calm human who had somehow defeated all of them. "What are you?" he demanded. "I am a medic," Danny said simply, "and these people are my patients, which means they are under my protection." He paused, and Kira saw something shift in his expression, something that made even her feel a chill. "If you or anyone else tries to hurt them again," Danny said quietly, "you will find out exactly how far a human will go to protect the people in their care." The raiders looked at each other, and Kira could see them reaching some kind of decision. The leader stood slowly, his hands held out, to show he was not reaching for weapons. "We will leave." he said, his voice carrying grudging respect. "You have made your point." Human Danny nodded. "Take your wounded and go and consider yourselves fortunate that I am a medic, because a warrior would not have let you walk away." The Cravath gathered their equipment and their still groggy companions and moved toward the tree line. The leader paused before disappearing into the forest. "What is your name? Human Danny Brooks?" The medic answered. "Why, because," the raider said slowly, "we will remember it and we will make sure others know not to interfere with your patients." Then Danny smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Good, spread the word that human medics protect their own." The raiders vanished into the trees and silence fell over the clearing. Hayes let out a breath he had been holding. That was terrifying. Danny turned back to his patients and his expression softened back into concern. How is everyone feeling? Any increased pain or discomfort? Just like that Kira thought he was back to being a gentle medic checking on his patients. The duality was stunning. The journey back to the main fleet took 3 hours because Danny insisted on monitoring his patients constantly during transport and refused to let anyone rush the process. Kira had called ahead to warn the command staff about what happened, but she knew that no report could really capture the reality of what she had witnessed. Her dragons flew escort with Ember on one side of Danny's medical shuttle and Frost on the other, like they had permanently adopted the human medic as part of their flight inside the shuttle. Danny worked steadily, checking vitals, adjusting medications, and keeping up a constant stream of reassuring conversation with his patients. Kira rode in the medical shuttle instead of on Ember's back because she wanted to observe the human more closely. She watched as he treated each scout with the same gentle care he had shown in the clearing, completely focused on their well-being. Hayes was dozing thanks to pain medication, but Chen was awake and watching Danny with obvious curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" the wounded elf said quietly. "Of course," Danny replied while adjusting the healing device on Chen's arm. "Why did you really come? You had to know it was dangerous. You could have waited for backup, or let someone else handle it." Danny was quiet for a moment, his hands never stopping their work. "I became a medic because I watched someone die once when I was young," he said finally, someone who could have been saved if help had arrived just a few minutes sooner. Chen listened intently, and Kira found herself leaning forward to hear better. "I promised myself that day that if I ever had the skills and ability to help someone, that I would never let anything stop me from reaching them." That explained everything. Kira thought the fierce determination, the willingness to fight, the absolute refusal to accept obstacles between himself and his patients. Rivera spoke up from her stretcher, her voice stronger now. "You are not like other medics I have met." Danny smiled slightly. "Instructors used to say I took the oath a little too seriously." There was a comfortable silence for a while, broken only by the hum of the shuttle engines and the soft beeping of medical monitors. Kyle, the young scout, finally asked the question everyone seemed to be thinking. "What happens when we get back to the fleet?" Danny shrugged. "I imagine there will be a lot of reports and probably some uncomfortable meetings with command. Will they punish you?" Hayes asked, his eyes opening. The human considered that. "They might try, but honestly, I'm not too worried about it." "Why not?" Kira asked. "Because," Danny said with quiet confidence, "I did the right thing, and sometimes that matters more than following every rule perfectly." The shuttle began its final approach to the fleet, and Kira could see the massive station growing larger in the viewport. There was a welcoming party waiting, she noticed, including several high-ranking officers from multiple species. This was going to be interesting. The shuttle landed smoothly, and Danny helped each of his patients onto hover stretchers despite their protest that they could walk. "You are injured," Kira heard him tell Hayes firmly. "So you are going to let me do my job, and that means riding to medical bay like proper patients." There was something deeply amusing about watching the human order around military personnel who technically outranked him. The shuttle door opened, and Kira stepped out first with Danny right behind her. Fleet Admiral Zhang was waiting, a stern-looking human woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She looked at Danny standing there covered in purple blood and raised one eyebrow. "Medic Brooks. I understand you had an eventful rescue mission." "Yes, ma'am," Danny replied, standing at attention despite the blood-staining his uniform. The Admiral looked past him at the scouts on their stretchers. "And your patients? All stable, ma'am?" Danny said with obvious pride, expected to make full recoveries. Zhang nodded slowly, then looked at Kira. Lieutenant Moon whisper. Your report mentioned that Medic Brooks engaged 15 Cravath raiders. Yes, ma'am, Kira confirmed while Ember and Frost landed behind her, flanking Danny protectively. The Admiral's expression did not change, but Kira saw something flicker in her eyes. 15 raiders, and you survived with all your patients intact. Danny shifted slightly. They were interfering with medical care, ma'am. I removed the obstacle. That is one way to phrase it. Zhang said dryly. I have also received reports that you let them leave afterward. Danny met her gaze steadily. I am a medic, ma'am, not an executioner. They were no longer a threat to my patients, so there was no reason to cause further harm. The Admiral studied him for a long moment, and Kira could not read the expression on her face. You realize that engaging in combat as medical personnel violates several protocols. Yes, ma'am, Danny acknowledged, and yet you did it anyway. My patients needed protection. Danny said simply, I took an oath to do no harm, but that oath extends to preventing harm when possible. Zhang was quiet, and Kira held her breath, waiting to see how this would resolve. Then the Admiral smiled. Your instructors were right. Brooks, you do take the oath seriously. Danny blinked in surprise. Ma'am, you are not being punished. Zhang said clearly. Effective immediately, you are being assigned as primary medical officer for joint operations between human and allied forces. That was unexpected, Kira thought. And clearly Danny thought so too, based on his shocked expression. The Admiral continued, It seems the galaxy needs to learn what human medics are capable of, and you appear to be an excellent teacher. She gestured toward the scouts. Get your patients to medical bay for full evaluation, then clean yourself up. You have a briefing. In 3 hours, yes, ma'am, Danny said, still looking slightly stunned. Zhang turned to leave, then paused, and Brooks, one more thing. Yes, ma'am. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. Good work today, you saved lives, and that is what matters most. Danny straightened, and Kira saw pride flash across his face. Thank you, ma'am. As Zhang walked away, Hayes let out a low whistle. You just got promoted for fighting raiders. That is the most human thing I have ever heard. Danny shook his head, but he was smiling. I got promoted. For saving patients, the fighting was just unfortunate necessity. Kira moved closer with her dragon still flanking them. What will you do now? She asked. Danny looked down at his blood-stained uniform. First a very long shower, then I suppose I will figure out what being a joint operations medical officer means. Ember rumbled and pushed her head against Danny's shoulder again. The human laughed and patted her scales. I am going to miss you too, he said to the dragon. You will see them again. Kira found herself saying before she fully thought it through, because I am requesting that you be assigned to my unit for field operations. Danny looked at her with surprise and something that might have been hope. You want to work with me after seeing what happens when I do medical calls? Kira smiled. I want to work with you because I saw what happens. You protect your people no matter what. And that is exactly the kind of medic my scouts need. Chen called out from his stretcher. We vote yes to keeping the scary human medic. The other scouts voiced their agreement, and Danny looked overwhelmed by the support. I would be honored. Lieutenant Moon whisper, he said formally. Kira extended her hand, and Danny shook it. Welcome to the team. Medic Brooks as they walked toward the medical bay with the scouts on their stretchers and 2 dragons following protectively, Kira realized that something important had happened today. The galaxy had learned that humans were not just clever or adaptable or determined, they were also fiercely protective of those under their care, willing to face any danger to help someone in need. And human medics were perhaps the most dangerous of all, because they combined the skills to save lives with the absolute conviction that nothing would stop them from doing so. Danny Brooks had shown everyone that the Hippocratic Oath in human hands was not just a promise to heal. It was a declaration of war against anything that tried to harm their patients. And the galaxy was starting to understand that humans took their promises very seriously. Ember and Frost walked beside Danny like honor guards, and Kira knew that her dragons had been right to trust him immediately. Some warriors fought for glory or duty or survival. But the truly dangerous ones fought for something much simpler, They fought because someone needed help and they had the power to provide it. That was what made humans special, and that was why the galaxy would never be quite the same after today.